there's really three things from a real estate point of view that luxury brands look at, and the first one is certainly the sort of typical phrase, location, location, location. It's still very much about the address for luxury brands. They still, whether it's in New York with Madison Avenue or closer to home, Bond Street or Sloane Street, or even in Paris, Faubourg Saint-Honoré, or even Avenue Montaigne, they still look at the address because they still want to position their brand in the best light possible. And I think very closely linked to that idea is, again, something we talk a lot about in property, which is adjacencies or tenant mix. So it's this idea of clustering together and being as close as they can possibly be to the super brands. So again, you hear these names and you hear luxury brands saying, I want to be seen as Louis Vuitton or Chanel or Hermes, so I want to be as close as I can to them. And I think the third side of that, which is perhaps something that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, is the actual physical space itself and the architecture of the buildings. That's something that has taken a lot of brands sort of to the next level. You've seen a lot of collaborations between architects such as Rem Koolhaas or Renzo Piano with Prada, Chanel, Dior, building these stunning buildings that really kind of illustrate and embody what a luxury brand should be. Yeah, so I think that's what makes them decide where to go. I don't think brands can ignore e-commerce, and I don't think they can separate that from their retail strategies. I think maybe a couple of years ago, or even 5 years ago, you could consider them as two separate strategies within the sort of overall brand strategy, but you can't do that anymore. I think people forget that consumers are getting much more savvy, and they think of a brand as one brand only. They don't think of the brand online and the brand in the stores. So you can't ignore the fact that you need to integrate online within store, and vice versa, really. You need to be creating the best flagship store online, but at the same time you need to be bringing that into the store to create the best possible experience. And I think it's been very clear in the last few years, the sort of winners and losers of the global downturn have been those that have been able to integrate technology and use technology almost as an enabler to create a better experience for the consumer. The more mature markets, so the US and some European markets, Paris, London, to a lesser extent Madrid, Milan, etc., are still going to be very much hotspots. And I think what we're going to see in these cities is the rise of what we call the luxury hub, or for lack of a better expression, the luxury village. So luxury brands have always actually clustered around each other, but I think what we're going to see is, because rents in these prime addresses that we've been speaking about have become so high, some luxury brands simply can't afford to be there. I mean, we quite recently published some research about the sort of top 10 prime rents across the globe, and Hong Kong came out as the most expensive city, and I think that's very much a reflection of luxury demand driving rents in places like Hong Kong, and it's very much mirrored by other cities like New York, like Paris, even Frankfurt. So I think when these brands realize that they can't necessarily afford to be in these prime locations, all of a sudden they're going to look at other areas where they can cluster and they can create equally exciting destinations. I think we've seen that in London with Mount Street. I mean, Mount Street 5 years ago was primarily a sort of art gallery antique location, whereas now with the arrival of Marc Jacobs and a string of other very, very interesting, more niche and more edgy fashion brands, it's become a destination in its own right. And I think you're going to see that spill into other areas of London. I mean, Mount Street itself is probably going to spill into Carlos Place and South Audley Street, and maybe even Davis Street, where Dunhill is with Burton House. And there might even be other areas across the globe where you'll see that too. I mean, it might be that New York will see meatpacking as an area of growth for luxury stores. Perhaps to a lesser extent, perhaps it'll be more the premium / diffusion brands going there because it's a less posh location, for lack of a better word. But again, there'll be other areas within these mature markets that you'll see growing as what I define as luxury villages. And the other side of the coin, of course, is the emerging markets, the BRIC nations. So Brazil and China and India, Russia perhaps to a lesser extent. We've been talking a lot about China in the last couple of years, and I think brands are now finally moving beyond Shanghai and Beijing, and they're looking at second tier and even third tier cities to expand and to grow their market there. And I think it's fascinating that they're finally doing that, because we can't forget that some of these cities in China alone are sort of 5 all the way up to 20 million people. So it's a huge potential for growth. I think some of the best examples of innovation from a real estate point of view in terms of integrating the whole e-commerce and virtual world of a brand into a store are right here in London. I mean, I'm perhaps a little bit biased. This is my market, this is where I work, and this is probably what I know best. And I think some of the brands, even the British brands here, are doing an amazing job. I mean, Burberry and the opening of Regent Street has been a game changer, absolutely. They have created what some people are calling a walk-in website, which is probably one of the best shops in the world now. And the way that they've integrated e-commerce into the store, I think, is amazing. And I think that what they've really understood is that stores are there to drive growth and to drive profitability. And I think if you create the best environment possible for your consumers to come and see you, then ultimately you're driving sales, whether it is today in the store or in a week's time on a smartphone, you're driving sales, and I think that's the bottom line. I think other examples of innovation are probably Dunhill is another example. Again, a British brand that's really understood that craftsmanship is at the heart of what they do, and they've put that into e-commerce and they've integrated it in the store. Now you can go and get a custom-made bag or a custom-made suit in the store, and you can order it on an iPad. So they've really understood how, again, technology can enable a better experience for the consumer.